So I picked James Obergefell. Most people will recognize the name from the famous court case, Obergefell versus Hodges. So James was together with his partner John for 22 years in total. They started pursuing marriage equality in 2011. John, his partner, was diagnosed with ALS, and the progression of his disease is what actually prompted them to seek out ways to get married. They were living in the state of Ohio, and in Ohio, if you are not legally married in a marriage recognized by the state, you cannot be buried together. They wanted to be buried together as spouses do, and they wanted their marriage to be recognized on the death certificate, because if they were not legally married, James would not have been listed as a surviving spouse on John's death certificate. So in 2011, when the Defense of Marriage Act was overturned, John's illness had progressed to a level where they knew he was going to die pretty soon. He was bedridden at the time, and family and friends actually raised enough money for them to get on a medical private jet and fly to a state where gay marriage was legal, the closest state that they could, which was Maryland. John was not well enough to get off the plane, that they were married on the tarmac and flew back to Ohio. So they took their marriage license from Maryland and brought it back to Ohio and attempted to sue the state in order for the state to recognize their marriage as a legal marriage. So they come back from the trip. John's illness is continuing to progress, and the urgency to have the state of Ohio recognize their marriage becomes even more because his death is impending. So they filed a lawsuit to be recognized as spouses. They win that lawsuit with the state of Ohio, but the state of Ohio attempts to appeal it. So basically, a temporary restraining order was placed, and the courts mandated and say, no, Jim needs to be listed as the spouse on the death certificate, that their marriage needs to be recognized. But with the appeal, if the courts sided with the state of Ohio, even if John died, they could go back and amend the death certificate and take Jim off of it. 3 months and 3 days after the lawsuit was filed, John died. So at that time, Jim was listed on the death certificate, but Jim essentially had to continue the fight in order to remain on the death certificate. So through a series of appeals, they eventually worked the lawsuit all the way to the Supreme Court. Jim said that the reason he continued to pursue the lawsuits was he wanted the federal government to say that they mattered and that they existed. That was the whole onus of the lawsuit, was that they wanted the government to recognize that their marriage was legitimate and that their marriage actually existed. In June 26th of 2015, the Supreme Court decided in favor of marriage equality. I think a lot of people know the case. I don't think a lot of people understand the last 3 months of his husband's life. They spent fighting to make sure that their marriage would continue to be recognized after John was gone.